Rabbi Wilhelm,
Yeah,
do you have a short word you could spare with us, please?
for this week's Parshas Viyachi. So, Parshas Viyachi also happens to be the siyum, the end, the conclusion of Chumash Bereshis. And Chumash Bereshis is in Svarim, the Medrashim, it's called Sefer HaYashar, the Sefer that talks about the upright, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and it's our duty to Smaisa Avos Siman Labanim, to learn from our Avos. That's what we're doing all these weeks, reading about the history. It's not just a history book. It's supposed to teach us how to behave. At the end of the parsha, when you're going to hear it, after the Kriyas HaTorah, we're all going to stand up and say Chazak, 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 V'lis Chazek. Now it's not only cheering, hey, go somebody else. Chazak, Chazak, V'lis Chazek is we got to become better. We got to learn from the lessons of the others and implement it in our day-to-day life. So maybe we'll stop for a second and see at least one hira from this parsha that we could try to use for our day-to-day life. And it ain't easy, my friends, because the chazak is not just a cheering. Chazak, it says in Svarim, is a Rosh Tevis. Charisha, Zriya, Ketzira. Plowing, planting, and harvesting, which means to say that you have to invest energy, you invest and toil in what you do, and then you'll be able to profit, and then be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So let's talk about two things that you could see from this week's parsha, and both about chinuch, which b'hashgacha pratis, I think in one of the days in the Hayom Yom coming up next week, we're going to learn the famous statement that the Rebbe brings, that just like there's a chiyuv to put on tefillin every day, there's a chiyuv to think about your chinuch habanim and habanis every single day. I think the Rebbe says about a half hour. Now, why the comparison to mitzvah tefillin dafka? So I once heard a mashpia saying that the investment you have to make in chinuch is not only like done. I made a phone call, done. It's like mitzvah tefillin. Just like mitzvah tefillin, the shibud halev v'hamoyach, you have to have your shalrosh, your mind into it, and you have to have your action into it. Chinuch, abanim v'abanis, is demanded from the parents to be solely and completely invested, mind and soul, and make sure the chinuch is right. And that's what Chassidish chinuch is. Now we all know the famous letter from the Friedrich Rebbe. It's brought actually in the beginning in Kuntres Avoda, a very stark letter. I'm going to read some of these words. The Friedrich Rebbe writes over here, Yomim Yavayu, time will come, and the younger generation will turn to us, the older generation, and say these words. Why did you not educate us the right way? Why didn't you tell us the truth? Amita shel Torah likim chayim. What Torah says how a person should live. Bimilua. And I want to insert something, if I may, a minute. Last week, me and you, Ben Tillion, during Kriyas HaTorah, we had a talk. After Kriyas, I shouldn't say during. After Kriyas HaTorah, we had a talk. What was the talk? There is one word that's mentioned in Chumash that changes depending on who says it. Changes the interpretation depending on who has it. Pari says to Yaakov and to Yosef's brothers, to Yosef and his brothers, oh, they're moving into my town, they're moving into my country. Listen, if they're Anshe Chayil, if any of your brothers are good people, then let them help out my flock too. Anshe Chayil means, according to Pari, people who know how to deal with cattle. Yisroi also uses Anshe Chayil. Moshe Rabbeinu, when you're going to make Dayanim, also use Anshe Chayil. What does Anshe Chayil mean to Yisroi? People who have money. So because they have their own money, they're not going to become influenced in any judgment. But again, Paroi looks at Anshe Chayil as people who know how to raise cattle. Yisroi looks at Anshe Chayil as people who have money. What does Shlomo HaMelech look at? How does he call Anshe Chayil? What does the Lubavitcher Rebbe call Anshe Chayil? Shlomo HaMelech in the pasuk right before the Haftarah of today, when the story of Adoniyo, they came to tell Shlomo HaMelech, Adoniyo is afraid of you, and I know he did harm to you. Would you accept him? Shlomo HaMelech says, if Adoniyo will be an Ish Chayil, I will accept him. What does it mean, ish chayil? If he'll be God-fearing. What does the Rebbe say what a chayil is? A chassid Yerushalayim v'lamdin. That's what a chayil is. So our job is to infuse, to teach our children who is to look up to. Who are the chayolim? Not the money makers. Not the cattle, the people who raise cattle, who have abundance. Begashmis. Chayil is a yerei chet. Chayil is a chassid Yerushalayim v'lamdin. This is what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. Why didn't you tell us the truth of Torah? How Torah views the world? How should we daven? How should we learn? How should we become a mitzvah? So let's not wait for the time when the kids come demanding for us why it's too late. Let's do it. I read a beautiful story. It's a touching story of a Jew who grew up in mid-America. He did not have an education the way we would like him to have. Nebuch, his father, passed away, and by the Levaya, the Chevra Kadisha saw something very funny. So after they buried the father, they turned to the kid and said, "Would you like to say Kaddish?" He says, "I can't read, I can't do anything," and it's getting embarrassing for him. And at one time, he turns to the caver and he says, "Ta! It's your fault I can't read. I can't say Kaddish." This is what the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying. Don't let this happen, and let's give the proper education to our children. So from our parsha this week, there's two beautiful lessons you could learn. Lesson number one is when Yaakov comes and sees the children of Yosef, he says, "Who are these kids? Who are these kids?" And Rashi says he felt that he couldn't give them a bracha. And Yosef says, "Hey, these are the kids. Asher nasam li elikim bazeh." Now what happened? And then he gives him a bracha. A minute ago he couldn't give him a bracha. And Yosef says, "These are my kids. Now he could." What changed? So the Mefarshim say, Yosef turns to his tati and says, "Ta, I know that what you're seeing in the future might be questionable. But the fact is, these kids grew up bazeh. Bazeh means here in Mitzrayim. Look who I produced in Mitzrayim. These kids, with all the nisyonis, with all the struggles, look who they are." And that's why the Rebbe emphasizes that by Yichi Yaakov Be'eretz Mitzrayim Shvayas Reshona, that Yaakov's life of the 17 years in Mitzrayim were his best life because Lemerois, and top, because of the old and the Shionis that were in Mitzrayim, and you're able to be a fruma Jew in Mitzrayim, when you have the struggles, the best of you comes out. And if Yosef was able to produce Bazeh, two kids like Menashe and Ephraim, Yaakov changes, and Yaakov gives him the bracha. Another thing we see, a very funny thing. Yaakov says to Yosef, "Okay, now that we're introducing ourselves and I know your family, the first two children will be counted as mine. The new children that you'll have will be counted as yours." And the question is obvious. The first two children Yosef had in Mitzrayim, when they never knew about Yaakov, you would think. So Yaakov should have said, "What you had, you had. Now the next children who will know me, I will let them be as mine." So why the other way around? So there's a beautiful explanation. The explanation is like this: Yosef, when he was mechanech his children Menashe and Ephraim in Mitzrayim, he spoke about Zayda, he spoke about Yaakov, and there was a hishtoikekus, there was a yearning. Let's be like Zayda. I wish we could talk to Zayda. There was I wish. So that Yaakov says that hishtoikekus, those type of children who grew up with this desire, that's mine. The later ones who have me available and accessible always, who knows? It's too available. Let's make sure that we all have the hishtoikekus to become better. We all have the hishtoikekus to teach our children what's right, what a true chayil is, and the same hishtoikekus we have to have for the Bias Mashiach Tzekenu B'Meira.